first up, Harsha Patel is the Managing Director and Transformative Participation and Partnerships for Doing Social. We're meeting for the first time today, by the way, in person, but it's been lovely because we have had conversations prior to this evening. But I'm really interested to hear more from Harsha about how we hold the middle. So how do we hold the middle when values, expectations, and human limits are in tension? Did I read that right? Did I give it the right emphasis?
You absolutely did. Thank you. Thank you for the emphasis.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome everybody, and it's lovely to see you all. Thank you first to the Sedulous team for inviting me to be part of this panel today. This topic really matters to me. The second thing I just want to say is I'll be referring mainly to my notes, which just helps me to keep on time. So I want to start with a question for you all, and I'd like you to just sit with it for a minute. Think of a time when you were invited into a group process, a project, a consultation perhaps, a meeting, any kind of collaborative effort, and it fell short of what you knew was right. Maybe the decisions had already been made before you arrived. Maybe you gave your time, your energy, yourself, and you sensed that your voice was heard, but your power wasn't. Or maybe you could see the urgency of the work, but you couldn't see how it would actually benefit the people that it was meant to serve. Perhaps you raised something important and were told that it had been noted, but nothing changed. But still, there was a lot that was good. The people were great, the communities were great, the work itself, the future possibilities. It felt too important to walk away from. So you kept going. Hold that. Because what I have learned is that the gap between our values and how we act when those tensions arise, that's where ethics lives. In my world as a practitioner, ethics lives in the decisions that I make when values, expectations, and human limits are in tension. So just a quick note to say that these slides will be shared after the presentation. On the final slide, there is a QR code which takes you to a PDF version. There's a lot of content in my slides. So my talk today is about what it takes to hold the middle between institutions and communities when we're being pulled in lots of different directions, about the tension and also the invisible labour that sits within it, and about what happens to ethics when the conditions, such as the time, the trust, the resources, the relationships around that work aren't designed to hold it. And when I talk about institutions, I'm referring to the organisations that hold the money. They're the ones that usually set the terms and decide what counts as success. It might be funders, universities, other commissioners, local authorities, universities. So the middle. This is the space where I work. I'm the practitioner that sits in the middle, holding and navigating values, expectations, and everyone's human limits. Can I just ask, can you see, am I in your way? Okay, right. We don't often talk about the person in the middle. And if we care about ethical practice, what happens in the middle really matters. So the job title for a practitioner like me could be something like this. I'd like to share a personal story from a project that I led with a previous institutional partner. It reveals something important about what happens to ethics when the conditions aren't right. I'll refer to the partner simply as the institution. They chose to partner with us to design and deliver a community participation project. And I'll just say that I've worked with a number of different institutions, so and I've had very similar challenges with many different institutions. So whilst I'm talking about one particular one, this is my sort of collective experience with many of them. As part of this particular partnership, I listened to the communities as well as the perspectives of people from all levels within the institution, where I found there were many different perspectives and tensions within the surface. That stuff is normal. I held it as part of the work, and then the reporting started. Suddenly, we were asked to produce report after report on timelines that felt arbitrary, random. It served the institution, not the project, not the communities. The institution assumed their need was the top priority and didn't even consider the scale of the work. And I can see a few nods there, so I'm sure this is familiar for many people. I began missing meals and abandoned my social life. And alongside that, our design, our approach that had been honed over decades was being represented by the lead, the institutional lead that I was working with, as though it was their ingenuity. Then something else shifted. I was in a joint session where I brought together senior institutional leaders and communities. I asked a question their own internal staff had raised, whether internal problems can be solved by the same systems that had created them. That might remind you of a particular quote by Audre Lorde. It struck a nerve with the institutional leaders. I was labelled subjective. It's true, I am subjective. We all are. Months later, when I reported internal people's experiences and urged for fairer forms of participation, I was called subjective again. My willingness to name hard truths was being dismissed as bias. And then I was asked to attend an internal meeting alone. I asked if I could bring another internal colleague who knew the history. It's a different project. The response from the institutional lead was sharp. No, you can't, they're busy. It no longer felt like a partnership, it felt like power play. And another layer, our work wasn't being credited publicly the way other partnerships were. For a small, not-for-profit organisation like ours, visibility is credibility. Someone else was getting the credit. By that point, I was working around the clock, trying to hold the community's interests where my heart sits, while institutional demands kept expanding and the relationship felt off balance. Maybe you can see where this is going. My body eventually gave in. I had a breakdown. I had to stop. I had reached my limit. I did go back a few months later and I finished the work, which laid out the choices. They chose what they chose. Look, nobody set out to do harm. We all wanted to do good work. But the conditions, the reporting demands, the power dynamics, the absence of trust, the absence of care for the partnership made ethical practice incredibly difficult to sustain. And some of those conditions are within our control if we choose to design for them. Ethics lives or fails in the conditions we create around the work. So what is actually being held? Well, this is what it looks like for me from the inside, from the middle. The tension is holding all of this at once. It's just what I could fit onto the slide. The practitioner may be holding all of this and more. The story I shared covers all three forms of invisible labour on this slide. Ethical judgment under pressure. What gets prioritised when the timeline is unrealistic and the relationship feels hostile? What gets compromised when we're under pressure or just exhausted? Here's the truth. Sometimes we end up shifting from doing what's ethical to doing what's manageable. Suppressing your own values. There's a cost to making it work when the conditions don't allow you to practice as you believe. For me, I had a breakdown. And power shaping choices. Even when we push back, power can still influence our choices if we're not careful. This is the invisible labour of practitioners, and it rarely gets named. In my experience, when the person in the middle isn't supported by the right conditions, the ethics of the whole process are at risk. So to institutions looking for practitioners to steward work like this, don't just ask how you find the right practitioner. Ask yourself, have you created the conditions for that practitioner to actually do ethical work? So in the interest of time, I will have to skip this slide, but I'd love to come back and talk more about who actually gains from participation processes. But I will leave you with this, which sort of sums it up, which is participation that is ethical isn't just safe, it's worthwhile. People should gain from the process. I believe ethical participation is a practice. It's lived, it's felt, and it's embodied. And that's what this next slide is about. And there's a lot on this slide. And I'm not going to read all of it, but I do want to say something about what's behind it. These are the conditions, some of the conditions, because I couldn't fit them all on, that I have needed in my own work and not always had. And when they were missing, I've watched ethical practice erode, a little here, a little there, until one day you look up and you realise that the work you're doing no longer aligns with the values that you started with. The practitioner in the middle can't hold what the conditions won't support. I'll say that again. The practitioner in the middle can't hold what the conditions won't support. So to the institutions that are out there, this slide says it. Trust the right practitioners, back them, be a safe institution to disagree with, and resource this properly. Not just the visible work, the invisible labour too. And centre well-being. That's at the core of everything. Earlier, I asked you to hold a moment, a time when something felt off, but you kept going. If something came to mind, maybe some discomfort, that hesitation, that sense that something wasn't right, I think you know that was your ethics that was speaking. The question is whether the conditions around you at that time made it possible for you to act on it. That's the work. Not writing better values or ground rules even. Not more compliance, not longer ethics forms. Designing conditions where that instinct, the feeling that something matters, that people deserve better, that this could be done more fairly, more justly, has somewhere to go. If you're a practitioner, protect your integrity and build your support. If you're an institution, start with one condition on this slide and do it properly, then move on to the next. If you're a community member, name what you want to gain from the process. That's the standard I'm interested in, and I think we're all capable of it if we choose to design it. Ethics lives or fails in the conditions we create around the work. Thank you for listening.